4, and then I'm done. All right, let's look through these. We're looking at the challenges of cities, which we know well because here in Pomona we do have some challenges, and a lot of these we may understand. Um, there are social challenges associated with the underclass residents in inner cities. There are inadequate job skills because a lot of times there's not the schooling to train people. The colleges are not always located downtown; they'll be outside of town. So, for example, let's say I lived in South LA, like, Claremont colleges are nowhere near me. UCLA is on the other side of town. USC might be kind of close. There's a culture of poverty. It's hard to get out of poverty. If you are raised in poverty, chances are that your kids will be that. It's really hard. Speaking of like personal experience, my mother, she's the first person in family history, we're talking generations, to get out of poverty. And mainly that's because luckily there was some government programs to provide her schooling and scholarship money. So she was able to get out of that. And usually if someone's able to get out of that poverty, that cycle ends. Homelessness. This is one we might know well. Homelessness here in California, we're the epicenter of homeless. We are less than 10% of the population of the United States, but we're 25% of the homelessness. Drugs, that is another problem because you have, with homelessness, sometimes that can lead to drugs or the other way, or just many times without job skills or options, people turn to selling drugs. This stuff is all kind of connected. And then, crime. Crime is going to be something else that happens because of, once again, homelessness and poverty may lead you to crime and drugs. Those two things may happen. Inadequate services. So just think of transportation in the city might be really tough. There's not the trains that we have, and you can be stuck in a poor neighborhood, and you can't get out. Or even something as simple as like a service like environmental services, like shade, like a park. Those are still services. Let me hide this. I know I have to do this every time. Okay. We don't have this one here, municipal finance shortage. There isn't the taxes taken in the same as a wealthy place, so we don't have the same funding for a city. So here in Pomona, we don't have as many wealthy people paying property taxes, say Claremont. So they have more money there because there are more people owning homes and paying those taxes, and that gives them more money to spend on schools and everything. Physical challenges, filtering and redlining, which we'll get into both of those. So crime, here's your crime. And if we layered this murder map, we would also see income, and that income would match. So areas where less money was made would probably match this. A food desert would match this. Those things they're all connected. Lack of high school degrees would match this. Lack of colleges would match this. Things are changing though. Gentrification is a form of urban renewal. We are familiar with this now. Cities have become hip places to live. This is old Cincinnati. So once this was wealthy, and then people abandoned the cities to move to suburbs, and they left it like this. Then it became hip to live in a city again. So you can see those streets and all those shopping places all fixed up. So there's critics of this, and they argue that it becomes too expensive and pushes out original residents. So maybe there was people that lived up here, and maybe now they're kicked out, and those are expensive lofts. Public housing. We used to have a lot of public housing, and it wasn't something that was associated with poverty. That's a new idea where we're saying that public housing people don't have money. For example, Singapore is a very wealthy country, and the majority of its population, the vast majority, live in public housing. Public housing is funded there, and people live cheaply in the city. So public housing was set up to provide affordable housing. When we started to abandon cities and cities lose money, these things were left alone to basically fall apart. So large high-rise subsidized housing projects in the United States are now considered unsatisfactory and are being leveled and replaced with middle-class housing. So what's happening is we're tearing these down. Then we're building, like, let's say, apartments that are bigger like this, right? And so what that does is that leads to a housing shortage, because this here is not as many people as this here. So as we're destroying public housing, the things we are building are not sufficient to fit any new people to fit in there. Okay, consumer services. Many U.S. cities have redeveloped consumer services like retail and leisure activities in their central business districts. So now there's a lot of things happening within a city. Consumer services are now hip. Like, people want to live in cities, so there's now things there to shop for like on a waterfront, which used to be an abandoned, derelict, falling apart like waterfront or something like in Long Beach. That's now a hip spot. Old factories are now turned around and turned into hip spots. Think about in Claremont, there is an old orange factory, which was turned into that really nice wood area that you can walk through. Like, that is now like a hip spot. So central business districts have taken these things and turned them around into consumer services. So this old terminal building, which probably was busy and then became abandoned, is now popular again. All right, demographic change. Chicago's African American and Hispanic populations are increasing. More suburban locations, while whites are moving back towards the city center. So how we had white flight back in the day when whites moved out to suburbia, now whites are moving back in, and people of color are moving out. It's a very strange process, but it's happening right now with gentrification. Let's move on then. So, change in Detroit. Detroit covers a large area compared with other cities of similar size of population. This difference in density is reflected in a large number of vacant houses. So this would be the whole how big Detroit is. It was massive. I mean, Detroit, I believe, had 1.5 million people. It was one of the biggest cities in the world, and now I think it has less than 500,000. So as that has happened, there's just abandoned neighborhoods, and many times they just catch fire. A lot of times people just light them on fire to get insurance money. So they're just having to bulldoze these and a lot of times create like urban farming areas. But Detroit is absolutely filled with abandoned buildings. I know here in Pomona we may have a couple, but Detroit would just blow your mind. It's all through here. Or it'll be like one person who has a house, and then next door it'll be like 3 abandoned houses. 2 of them may be falling over. So they're really struggling to try to figure out how to move forward and compact their city more. Oh, here they're saying 680,000. I bet that is much less. Now that's much less. If I have time, I'll look it up and show you. Okay, sustainable development. Developed countries produce more carbon dioxide than non-developed. So we here in the United States produce a ton of CO2, and many European ones do also. But they go around telling other developing countries to not pollute, but yet we are the biggest polluters. Look at North America. Us in Canada, we are big time, and we're per capita. So in other words, China may now pollute more than us, but when we do it per capita, so we divide their pollution by their 1.3 billion people, the U.S. is probably twice as bad per person or more. The United Nations target for U.S. carbon dioxide emissions by source, most reductions are forecasted through reducing the use of fossil fuels. So we are supposed to reduce the use of fossil fuels. That's how we're supposed to cut this down. Right now, we are not using a lot of fossil fuels, and if you look outside, because of where the COVID-19 virus that's spreading on, like right now outside is clear. It's very clear. The clearest skies I've ever seen in California, and that's because there's not fossil fuels being used at this moment. But when things clear up, the skies will probably not clear up, and people will be using them again. So here's a breakdown. This is what's happening now. Petroleum, boom. And then what's this one? Natural gas, that's from fracking, that's that one. And then coal. And in the future, we want petroleum to be this, much smaller. And then see this guy here? That's biomass. In other words, we want people to be using natural sources, reusable sources that don't damage the environment as much. So sustainable development. Electricity generation by the U.S. state. Electric cars are less polluting when powered by energy generated from lower carbon emitting sources. So in other words, electric cars, I mean, obviously we should know this, they pollute much less. So let's look here. Source of electricity in the United States, as we're moving towards electric sources, coal, natural gas, nuclear. You have a breakdown by state, what they're using here. Electric vehicles with lower emissions than hybrids. You can see places where electric vehicles are taking off. Okay, controlling congestion and air pollution. Road congestion is controlled through charges. You charge people to enter a city if it's too crowded. Tolls, you make them pay, like to go over a bridge. Permits, can't park on that street without a permit. Or you just outright ban cars. These are ways to control road congestion. Air pollution, the way we control diesel, hybrid very well, ethanol, electric, that's a good one. Plug-in hybrid, that does well to control air pollution. And then the one that we're really trying to get to work is the hydrogen fuel cell, which is great for power and does not cause a lot of pollution. Congestion pricing, you have to pay to drive around this area. It's a congested area. If you really want to drive around there, you're going to have to pay during the peak hours to go through it. No car zone. Look at that. Everyone's strolling. This is Copenhagen. Every now and then, Los Angeles will do a no car day when everyone rides their bikes and walks around.